Hello there everyone, welcome back to another one of my deck guides for the OP02 format. Today I'm going to be talking about Ivankov. If you guys enjoy this sort of content and you are watching this on YouTube, please do check out my Patreon linked in the description. My patrons have had access to this for quite some time. By the time you're seeing this, I make these sort of guides and other competitive focused content like meta breakdowns which go up on my Patreon in advance of major tournaments. So if you're interested in the results of my testing and all the insights I have, then please do take a look. Right, so let's go ahead and get started with the shilling over. Also like and subscribe if you are watching this on YouTube. Of course, to my patrons, thank you very much for your support. So Ivankov is a very interesting deck because I think in the English format it is really being very underrated. I'm not seeing a great deal of people playing it. It has one of the lower representations for what I think is really a really powerful deck. You know, it doesn't actually really have any bad matchups. It's got one bad matchup, but that bad matchup is also very unlikely to see a major representation. Now, of course, in contrast, doesn't have very many good matchups either, but, you know, not having a huge variety of swinging in terms of matchup is actually quite a good thing, because it means that you're not kind of at the whims of whatever the tournament gives you. You can just keep winning all day no matter what you play. Additionally, something about Ivankov that is really good is the RNG can make it a little bit difficult to play around. It can be quite difficult to know exactly what your opponent has, and you can use that at high levels to just bait your opponent into going for a lethal when there's actually no chance they have it, but you can force them to overcommit because they've just seen you discard so many cards that, you know, you're drawing fresh cards. It's entirely possible that they make a really bad misplay. And of course, you know, the leader effect is fundamentally giving you free advantage. It is kind of giving you free reign to just guard attacks that no other deck really could, because you're just going to redraw up to 2 anyway. And of course, the major reason you might want to play Ivankov is it's good. It's really, really good. I think it's probably the worst of the top tier decks, but it is definitely a top tier deck. And I think even saying it's the worst of the top tier decks is kind of making it seem worse than it is as well. And potentially I'm being overly harsh here on how good it is, but I think it's very important for everyone to get a good amount of experience playing Ivankov so they can actually understand how strong this deck is, because it's really, really good. So talking of strengths, let's go through those. So one of the biggest ones is it can be quite difficult to anticipate its plays beyond turn 4. That's because the Ivankov curve is very standard for the first few turns of the game. So turn 1, you're going to try and play a buggy. Turn 2, it's going to be a 3-cost Doflamingo. Turn 3, it's going to be a 5-cost Crocodile, and then turn 5, it's going to be the Ivankov Luffy combo. Turn 4, it's going to be the Ivankov Luffy combo. And after that point, you don't really know what they're going to do, and there can be quite a lot of variety in terms of deck building. But also at that point, usually you're going to start seeing the Ivankov player becoming very, very, very aggressive and just going for the kill, because they've set up their really high value board. They've done it very quickly, and at this point, they can start doing bits. It's consistent despite the randomness as well. You know, when you first read through the Ivankov cards, you think, oh, there must be a lot of RNG here. It's actually not. It's actually very consistent. Because you have tools like Buggy, your top 5 searcher, and you have New Karmaland, which is incredibly powerful in terms of just letting you filter and find your pieces and just get rid of dead draws. The deck is very, very good. And of course, its turn 4 and 5 are powerhouse turns. It's very, very scary, and basically it's going to fundamentally depend on what your deck is doing, on how resilient to that turn 4 and turn 5 you are. But certain colors, black, are very, very, very weak to the Ivankov turn 4 and 5, and certain colors are stronger. For example, decks that rely on 5 costs and above, like Law, which is this deck's worst matchup, are more resilient. But in general, like, no one is immune. It has one of the best curves in the game, that curve I mentioned there. It's you know, incredibly good. You establish, on turn 1, you establish something that can clear your opponent's cheap dudes. On turn 2, you establish a blocker that can check top 5 to stack your remaining draws. On turn 3, you establish a vanilla who's just, you know, value stats. And on turn 4, you establish 2 massive 7Ks. So, I mean, a really, really, really powerful curve. It doesn't, as I said, it doesn't have really bad matchups into the meta threats. It has one bad matchup into Law, but again, Law is one of those decks where it's not going to be a huge portion of the meta due to its high skill cap. You know, it has a high skill ceiling and a high skill floor, and, you know, it is also a 2-color leader, so it's entirely possible you get blown out. And in this aggro meta we have, playing Law is always a little bit risky. And of course, game knowledge, as a result of Ivankov being quite underrated, can be lacking. And I do see people making strong misplays into Ivankov, just because they don't know the matchup, because they haven't tested it, because they're expecting your Zoros, your Kinemons, and not necessarily the blue matchup. But of course, weaknesses, as every deck has. You can get screwed by your own RNG. If you don't see your buggy, if you don't see your new Karmaland, then you're kind of, at the whims of fate, essentially. Like, oh, am I going to hard draw what I need? And, you can just draw bricks off of your empty... you can empty out your hand and then just draw cards with no counter, and suddenly your opponent has the freest lethal on the planet. It can be very scary, but the Ivankov builds that developed over the course of the Japanese format have minimized this weakness to a pretty strong extent. If your board is dealt with, it's pretty much impossible to recover. Blue is the most honest deck in the game. They pretty much have no ways of getting extra attacks than what you can literally see in front of you. Every other color in the game, red has Rush, purple has Rush, green has Odin, or Kid Leader effect. So outside of black. But black has hard removal, which in some ways you can see as Rush. Blue has bouncing, so that's about as close to Rush as it gets. Really, blue and black are just very, very honest, but blue just feels the most honest, because it doesn't have, these insane plays outside of the Eva Luffy. And as I said, it's a very predictable turn 1 to 4. It's always going to be the same thing if you are seeing your pieces. It is relatively skill intensive. I would say, this is potentially being a little bit overly generous to Ivankov players, but I do think, you do need to play the deck to a pretty decent level. I think you have to put more into it than you have to put into, for example, a Kinemon. I think Kinemon, because the mulligan for Kinemon is so easy, because the turn 1 and turn 2 are so powerful, often that can be all you need, and you might not even need strong mid and late game fundamentals to just get through a tournament with Kinemon. Whereas with Ivankov, you definitely, because your plays are set for the first half of the game, you do need that strong mid to late game understanding of matchups and how to properly attack and how to structure your attacks and how to read into what your opponent has and all these sorts of skills. And as, of course, in Counter 2 doesn't really have any bad matchups, it doesn't really have any good matchups either. Black is its best matchup, I will say it does have quite a good black matchup, but that's still, maybe 60-40, it's not overwhelming by any means. So, the key cards here, it's pretty much just Eva and Luffy, so let's talk about these two cards. So, Emporio Ivankov is a 7-cost 7,000, which says, on play, draw until you have 3 cards in your hand, and then play up to 1 blue Impel Down type character card with cost of 6 or less from your hand. And of course, Luffy is a 6-cost or less blue Impel Down type character with 7,000 power, which says, on play or when attacking, you may trash 2 cards from your hand, return up to 1 character with a cost of 4 or less to the owner's hand, then this character gains double attack. So this is a very, very, very powerful combo. For 7 Don, you establish 2 dudes on the board. Eva can draw you up to potentially filter for the Luffy, and then of course the Luffy, you can just pitch the cards you drew right off of Eva to bounce a threat your opponent has, or you can save it until the following turn. Luffy's actually a very annoying card to deal with because it's a 6/7. It is just out of range of a huge number of removal tools. Usually it is going to hang around, and if it does, if your opponent can't instantly deal with it, it is going to be running shit, because man, you stack this dude up with double attack and he is scary, especially because pretty much every blocker in the game can be bounced by this guy with the exception of 7-cost Kid, which you never really want to be playing into blue anyway, because they're just going to Doffy or Mihawk it, or Queen. I believe those are the big ones in the format. Hina, I guess, as well. But pretty much everything else is just going to get bounced, and unless you have lots of small ones, which again have fallen off in the format due to the existence of red, thanks to Vista, so people typically aren't going to be playing them, you can find yourself in a bit of a pickle. So, this is the Osaka Championship Series top 8 deck list. I do apologize for the resolution. I don't know why it's come out so blurry, but I do hope you can make out what the cards are. I'm going to go through them anyway now. So 4 copies of Alvida. This is almost always just a 2k counter, but into the Zoro matchup it is actually very, very good. I will happily trade a card in hand, especially in this deck, to just bounce one of my opponent's units that they are, essentially trying to kill me with. And of course, then you get the Alvida swing into another one of their units to really just pressure them and force them to just continue lose board presence. Alvida is incredibly good into the Zoro matchup. Conversely, 9-cost Mihawk is incredibly bad into the Zoro matchup, but in everything else you do want to be playing it. Pretty much everything else, because, almost everything is, outside of green, is playing 7 costs or lower, and even green is playing 7-cost Kid is quite a popular decision. You can't bot deck an Odin with this, but you certainly can bot deck a 7-cost Kid or a Hawkins or any other really strong card. 3 cost Doflamingo. This is your blocker. This is your ideal turn to play. This is going to let you stack the top cards of your deck. Like, basically check if you are drawing what you need to draw, and if you're not, just sending those dudes to the bottom. And it also is a 4K, which means you can trade it into things like Raito and Robin. And of course, it's a blocker as well, which is very valuable. 2 copies of Bonclay. This is just because it's a 2K counter. 4 copies of Inazuma. This card is insane. So this is a 4/5 blocker, so it's already pretty good. But because, you know, we do want these blockers that are a little bit bigger, because the only way they're going to be able to remove this early game is going to be an Otama Robin / Otama Vista / just hard jet pistol combo. And again, if they're using those on this card, then you're probably quite happy. But also, when you have 1 card or less in hand, it becomes a 7K, which means that this can very suddenly be a very, very large blocker, or indeed a very, very large attacker. You have multiple ways to empty out your hand to make this guy live. He is very, very, very good, basically into every matchup that isn't just, you know, dealing with 4 costs for breakfast. Of course, 4 copies of Ivankov. We went over why this card is so good. 3 copies of Crocodile. You play this because 1, it fits into your curve very well, and 2, it is a valid target for the Ivankov effect, so you have 7 targets. Technically more, thanks to the Bonclay we see after Luffy there, but generally you would prefer to be playing the Crocodile. 4 copies of Buggy, this is a search card, so of course you play it, and 4 copies of Luffy, it is your power card of the deck. 4 copies of Impel Down Bonclay, this is again mainly because it is a 2K counter, but it is a body you can play if you absolutely need to. You can play it off of Ivankov to just establish a board, and potentially you can just be bot decking stuff. That's, you know, an option you have. 4 copies of Mr. 3 Galdino. This guy's okay. It's like a much worse version of 7 cost Kid. Being a 4 cost is vulnerable to a lot, but the fact you do have this access to potential, this extra aggression, whilst maintaining a blocker. Again, you have no real issue discarding cards in your hand in Ivankov because you are just going to redraw them. That does make him very good. 4 copies of Mihawk, again, just a 2K counter. As you can see, this deck plays, I believe, 14 2K counters because you really do need to be drawing them off the top of your deck. 2 copies of 7 cost Doffy. This is, again, just a big dude. You do want to be giving yourself lots of nice plays on curve. And the card is just very, very good, fundamentally. And 4 copies of New Karma Land. I've seen people who don't play 4. I previously didn't play 4 either, but the logic makes incredible sense. You have so many ways to just discard excess copies that it's not a problem whatsoever, and you really want to see this card early, because if you play this, like, going second, turn 1, Buggy New Karma Land is insanely good, because at that point, you know, you are absolutely guaranteed seeing everything you need to see for the rest of the game. It's drawing 2 for a turn, essentially, is what you're doing with New Karma Land set, and that is very, very, very good. So, on to the matchups, which is, I imagine, the most valuable part of these guides for you all. We'll start with Red Zoro. This is probably the most popular deck in the game at the moment, up there with Whitebeard. I would say this is relatively 50-50. So your mulligan targets are going to be Alvida and Buggy, for the reasons we discussed. But essentially, these are cards you can trade with Zoro's board in the early game. And the name of the game really is to just slowly drain Zoro of resources, and make sure you survive long enough into the game where their attacks are no longer particularly threatening. They're not able to do huge numbers of them every single turn, and you are able to just kill them over the course of a couple of turns. So I say here you want to go second. That's just because you want the extra card, usually. You know, it's always really nice, and of course it does enable you to play something like an Alvida on your first turn. So as I say here, you must build board and be able to clear Zoro's attackers. This is imperative. If you cannot build a board, if you can't deal with their attackers, you are just going to get stomped. Don't be afraid to drop your entire hand in guarding. I mean, your leader effect says draw 2, so if you drop your whole hand, it's fine. You're just going to redraw them anyway. Once Zoro runs out of steam, it's pretty easy to kill a Zoro player over 2 turns. They do not have much defense. So usually you'll find around turn 4 or turn 5, you've done your Luffy Eva combo. Luffy is going to have double attack, and they're probably not going to have enough cards in hand to really stop a 9k Luffy swing. And even if they do, well, you just ripped 3 cards out of their hand. You're probably quite happy with that exchange, because that's really going to be very detrimental to them. You basically just maintain these in life total. It's very difficult for them to lethal you in 1 turn if you are above 2 life. 2 life is the lowest you really want to be going. 1 at the absolute worst case, but you got to be wary of a Luffy Diablo Jambe combo, which might just kill you if you only have 2 cards in your hand. So you do need to be wary of those. But I'd say Zoro, it's very winnable for sure, especially if the Zoro player isn't really prepared for the Eva matchup, and there are certainly cards in the main deck to make it a lot easier. Next, we have got Kinemon. So this is, again, one of the big meta threats. And here you want to be searching for... So I will also say, Buggy is pretty much a search for in every single hand. In general, you want to be searching for Buggy and counter cards, because Buggy can help you find your other cards, and you know, it's going to help you find your combo, and you need counter cards to just guard with early game, because you want to be maintaining a high life total with Eva in the early stages of the game. So later on in the game, when your opponent is swinging in with, you know, 7, 9, 10k, you can just take it because you don't really care. You're going to be like, yeah, that's fine, I'm on 4 life, you can do 2 10k swings into me, that's fine, you're not killing me this turn. So the reason you want to be mulliganing for Buggy and then Mihawk and Doffy is because a lot of Kinemon lists are playing 7-cost Kid, but even if they're not, they have a good number of 5 costs that you would like to be dealing with, and being able to just bounce or bot deck those is very, very good. Of course, your combo is another thing you would like to see, but you know, you don't have to hard mulligan for it, you have ways to filter for it. We choose to go second because if Kinemon goes second, they're going to Okiku Yamato pretty much every single time, and Jesus, that is basically impossible to deal with the sheer tempo swing that gives you. Yes, you are clapping back with a turn 4 powerful tempo swing of your own, but they are also just going to be able to be very aggressive in those opening turns. And if they're being aggressive, that means you are going to lose the game, because they get you down to 1 or 2 life, and then they establish an Odin, and it's kind of over. It's pretty much impossible to recover from that position, because they are just going to keep driving face, and you really do not have the aggression to deal with that if they're doing it all on curve. You try not to leave them on 1 or less units in the first few turns as well, because I mean, obviously, if you set them to 0, then like fundamentally that's still good, you know. But if it seems like a situation where they're just gonna go, okay, cool, Odin on 7 Don, it might be more powerful to just let them have something that's taking up space on their board, that's denying them a really powerful on-curve play like that, as opposed to just like trying to clear like a Momonosuke or something. Like, you know what? It's probably worth letting them have an extra card in exchange for them not playing Odin that turn. Once you've established Eva Luffy, it does become quite difficult for green. You pretty much get to bounce all their blockers. Again, 7-cost Kid, it's free real estate. If they play that, just Mihawk it, just Doffy it. They've lost a whole turn. That is, honestly, like, if they do that into Eva, they might just lose the game off of that single play. So yeah, it's definitely a very winnable matchup, but also if you go first, if they get to chuck an Odin, or God forbid 2 Odins out on curve, it's kind of over. So it can be very luck based, but in terms of the opening hands, in terms of how things go, but it is very winnable. It's certainly not like a dire matchup or anything. It's pretty 50-50. Law, this is your horrendous matchup. So, of course, you want to be going for the Holy Trinity of Buggy, Eva, and Luffy. You want to be going first. This is really, really tough, basically. You need to apply pressure before they can get their advantage engine going. Law is going to spend the first 2, usually 3 turns, not really doing anything. If they're really rushing to make their leader effect happen, they can make it happen on turn 3, but that's pretty much the earliest it will ever happen. It can't really happen before that. Even going second, right? They're just not going to be able to do it. But turn 3, like, yes, they can force it to happen if they're just playing non-stop cheap dudes. And if that's what they're doing, and you are just pressuring face, that can be very, very difficult for them to deal with. Basically, you're also able to get their combo out after turn 3 if you go first, because they'll have just had 6 Don, and if they haven't comboed immediately into Law, then you're probably in quite a good situation, because you're going to be able to bounce whatever they've done. You're going to have to, they're forced to commit extra Dons to actually making their leader effect go off. Yeah, that can swing the game. You need to attack, attack fact, you need to attack fast, attack aggressively and threaten lethal as fast as you can. I don't really know why I said the word fact there, but there you go. Yeah, you need to be aggressive into this deck. Law doesn't really have the much counter power. It kind of relies on its blockers to survive and just getting insane value out of its leader effect and just cheating out 5 costs and then being able to deal with your board. If Law is able to just deal with your board, though, you are kind of screwed. It is very, very difficult for them to manage, for you to deal with that. You kind of have to rush them down. Honestly, you will probably just take an L to a Law player if you play against them, but Law is not a very popular deck. At most, you're looking at 10% of a tournament, 5% of a tournament playing Law, so it's very unlikely to actually come up, but if it does, then you do your best to rush them down. Whitebeard, this is going to be a very popular matchup you see. Again, you want to be mulliganing for the Holy Trinity and counter power, mainly Buggy and counter power. you need to go second here. The reason you have to go second is because you have to apply pressure during the game. You cannot let Whitebeard just sit there and accumulate cards without swinging. If you go first and you play your ideal curve, it's 1, 3, 5, 7. You need every single one of the dons you are using to play your ideal curve. As a result, you do not have a don to attach onto Ivankov and then just swing face. You also want to be guarding every 6k swing that Whitebeard throws into you. Of course, if it throws like an 8k in or something, then maybe it's okay to just let that one through. But I don't know, depending on your hand, it might be worth just dropping it to counter that. Remember, you have lots of ways to plus when you are at low hand. Focus on finding your ideal curve and attacking 6k every turn to reduce Whitebeard's hand. If they just take the 6k swing, then okay, that's fine. You are putting them on a faster clock, right? Like fundamentally, after their turn 5, they should be at 1. Their turn 5 is also the earliest they can play a Whitebeard. So if they take 1 hit, they're going to be at 1, even if they do play a Whitebeard. And if they don't play a Whitebeard, then they're going to be at 0 going into your 10 don turn, which means that you can really apply pressure because on your turn 5, that is when you kick over into aggro from setup. So it is very, very possible to beat a Whitebeard player. Luffy can bounce all of Whitebeard's blockers, so basically they're going to try and deal with your Luffy ASAP, but usually they're not going to be able to. They essentially have to Otama pistol it, and of course they are going to go through a lot of cards, so it is very possible that they will instantly have the out, but if they don't, they can be very, very, very screwed. And yeah, make sure to deal with Whitebeard's board as best you can if it looks like a Moby Dick variant, because you cannot let them have a board. And again, as usual, you want to be guarding early to maintain a high life total to just give you those extra turns you need to just force attacks through. Whitebeard typically needs 1 to 2 turns of full-on aggro to kill, and if you are able to make it through those, you do win. But of course, if Whitebeard is able to survive, then you're in a bit of a rough situation. The mirror match. This is a skill diff. You want to be going first, and of course it's the usual Holy Trinity of Mulligan. The reason you want to be going first is you have to kind of just apply pressure. If the Eva player you're against isn't good, then they will just take those early attacks, and that kind of seals the game for you. But also going first lets you play your curve. And you know what? If they have an extra card, who cares? In the mirror match, it really doesn't matter that they have one extra card. By dealing extra damage and by playing your 1, 3, 5, 7 curve, that means on your 9 dawn turn, you are going face and you are going aggressive. Also, oh my god, avoid playing a single 4-cost unit. They are just going to get bounced by the Luffy. You know it is coming. Focus on your 1, 3, and then 5+. Nothing wrong with playing a buggy. If they bounce a buggy by discarding 2 cards, honestly, you're probably quite happy. Again, if they bounce a Doffy by discarding 2 cards, you're also probably quite happy because that was a neg trade for them. But yeah, other than that, you're able to establish a large board. The winner is basically the player who deals more damage and is able to just rush out that high-cost board, which is why going first is better, because you're doing it first, you're getting your attacks with it first, and again, blue's a very honest color, so if you're able to stay at about 3 to 4 life before their big turn, you can take most of their swings and then just guard the last one, and you're probably going to kill them on the crackback. So that's the thing to bear in mind. I think the Eva matchup very much is go first, but it is winnable going second if they are worse than you, but if you're of equal skill, you kind of have to go first. Kaido, this is an interesting one. So again, Holy Trinity, you want to be going second, and you need to be very careful about Hell's Judgment. Remember, your big dudes are 7k, so slap dons onto them. So you're forcing Kaido to just commit extra cards. Do not give them a free block with a Hell's Judgment. You want to be very mindful of 10-cost Kaido as well, so you don't actually want to build too wide a board immediately, right? Like, do your 1, 3, 5, 7, and then after that, you don't need to keep committing to board. If they 10-cost Kaido you, then you just stack up and then try and Eva Luffy again. And if you're able to do that, you usually win. Try to rush them down to 1 life before they can 10-cost Kaido you if you can, because that just essentially seals the game. They're not really going to be able to handle that. Obviously, if you get them to 0, then that's just over. They cannot 10-cost Kaido you because you just slap 10 dons onto your leader and you swing. But even 1 life, it just puts them in a really sticky situation. Luffy can deal with all their blockers besides queens, so you can be pretty aggressive, and of course if they play a queen, right, yep, that's fine. Again, you can just swing big numbers and they'll just use the queen. So, by the time they're actually playing a queen, it's going to be at earliest turn 3, and if you've gone second, then that's going to be your Eva Luffy combo, and you can also get a 6k swing in, so you're pretty okay with them doing that. It's not a huge deal. Avoid playing 4-cost cards because 6-cost king will just pop them, so again, your things like Inazuma and your Galdinos lose a lot of value, so you just want to be focusing on other tools. And you go second to ensure that you can still combo if they play Magellan. This is the really big thing. People don't factor in Magellan Magellan. If they Magellan you, you're fucked going first, because that you're not playing on curve anymore. You're not getting your combo. It's pretty much impossible to win. You have to go second, honestly, or hope they don't see the Magellan on curve, because if they do, you are screwed. And it's okay to kill Magellan once you hit 10 Don, because okay, then you're going to have to wait, whatever, it's fine. But yeah, make sure you go second if you can. The Kaido player will usually want to go first if they're not particularly good anyway. They're not going to be abusing the fact that, oh, you know what, if I go second here, I can totally screw with this blue player's curve by playing Magellan. So if they know the matchup, you might be in a bit of a rough situation, but if they don't, it should be pretty free. Smoker. This is, so we hit the black part of this video, and this is when you're just looking at your really nice matchup, to be honest. So again, Holy Trinity, this is advantageous, and you want to be going second. This is probably your easiest matchup. I misspelled here. Borsalino and Kuzan are dead cards, and it's very difficult for black to deal with on curve. So yep, okay, so they can use, on their turn 4, where they have, well, you're going second, so it'll be on their turn 5, will be after you've done this. They cannot 10 cost Kuzan and just deal with a Luffy, because it's 6 cost. So what they have to do is they need to Smoker effect, reduce its cost by 1, and then play something like a Sakazuki, which means they've already committed 7 Dons to dealing with your Luffy, and they've lost 2 cards from hand, you know, 1 to play the Sakazuki and 1 to pay for the cost, and you're kind of vibing at that point. They've really had to commit a huge amount of resources into it, and if you can just do it again, then they're screwed. Also, it's really imperative that you bounce the Borsalino and bounce the Kuzan. If you see both, just bounce the Kuzan, because they're not going to be able to play that out and get the effect off to just get value. Because if they have a Kuzan on board, they're going to swing with the Kuzan first, reduce the cost of the Luffy, and then hard play the 10 cost Kuzan, which is going to nuke the Luffy down, and then that is it. They've actually managed to do it without it really costing them anything, and at that point you're in a really bad situation, because once the 10 cost Kuzan is established, the game can swing over into black's favor. So make sure you deal with these threats before they can hit you with 10 cost Kuzan. Keep your life total relatively high, apply pressure, and just yeah, as long as you deal with those threats, this is a pretty free matchup for Eva. And of course, Zed as the final, Zephyr as the final deck here. Again, the Holy Trinity is the mulligan targets, and again, it is pretty advantageous to you. But here it's even more so, because you go second in this matchup, and you force them to basically have ramp or nothing. If they have ramp, then they're discarding cards to make that happen, which means you can apply a lot of pressure. Now, the one thing about Zephyr is that they will be able to deal with your Luffy on their 10 cost Kuzan turn, because they have the leader effect. So they're not as worried about the Luffy, but you know, you do still have the fundamental advantage of bouncing the Borsalinos, bouncing the Kuzans. Zephyr is a deck that plays a lot of 2k counters, so the fact that you are naturally swinging 7k is incredibly good. Make sure you bounce that 4 cost Kuzan before they have the 10 Don, otherwise you're going to lose your Eva Luffy combo, because yeah, if they have that, then they're going to swing with Kuzan, play 10 cost Kuzan, pop Luffy, swing with leader, pop Ivankov, and you cannot win in that situation. Like, then it's over. They have swung the game thoroughly in their favor, but it's pretty unlikely for that to happen. You can apply a lot of pressure, and as long as they are unable to do that, then you should have the game. So there we go. That is it for this deck guide to Impel Down Ivankov. What is, in my opinion, one of the most fun decks in the format. I really do enjoy playing this leader, and I do think it is very underrated. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Did you find this video helpful? I really hope you did. Please do look forward to many more deck guides coming. As of the time of this recording, I have done not Smoker, I have done Kinemon, I've done Whitebeard, and I have now done Ivankov. You can look forward to deck guides on Zoro, on Smoker, on Zephyr, on Law, all coming up over the next few months, so please do stay locked in onto this Patreon as those come out. Hopefully I'll be getting one out every couple of weeks or so. That is the goal, every 1 to 2 weeks to be getting one of these out until the entire format is basically covered. So thanks again for watching. If you're seeing this on YouTube, please do check out that Patreon. I really do appreciate the support. But of course, if you cannot, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel for more One Piece content. And that'll be it for this one. I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.